I'm born in Macomb, Mississippi. Well, life was beautiful. Life was great. I mean, I'm from a musical family, so I've heard music from before I entered to this side of life. My grandfather, Sammy Jackson, was a singer, guitarist, harmonica player who taught Reverend Charlie Jackson, and my uncle, Little Freddie King. And he taught my grandmother to play guitar as well, and he was more into blues, and she was into gospel. So I heard the blues from my grandfather's knee, and I heard gospel from my grandmother's knee. And as far as we can go back, Shane Jackson, Will Jackson, lots of musicians in my family. So life relative to music was wonderful because there was always music around the house, and music just became a part of celebration and one of the joys of life. See, you know, people talk about the gospel and they talk about blues. In some families it starts off like that, but it's just songs that they would play. And some of it, my grandfather would play blues, and my grandmother loved country music. So what I heard as a kid before I made a decision that I'm going to, you know, be a professional musician, I was already a musician because of all of the people in the family. So primarily the music that you heard around the house was blues, gospel, and country. And then family members would make up songs about anything, about food, about clothing. So there was always the creative element, you know, the same thing is within blues, that's within jazz. My grandfather.
Your grandfather?
Of course, Sammy Jackson. And the first blues, or this is blues and gospel, because if you listen to Reverend Charlie Jackson, my cousin, his gospel is very, very bluesy. Yeah? And the one interesting thing about that is that Hank Williams Jr. just recorded one of his songs, Tangle Up in Jesus, you know? And so it's interesting how life kind of circled, because the first person that I heard playing electric guitar was my cousin, Reverend Charlie Jackson. And I only ever heard my grandfather play acoustic. Now, after I began to sort of become more serious about the guitar, as opposed to it's just something fun to do, then I began to identify with the names of people that I heard on the radio, whether it's B.B. King, or T-Bone Walker, or Johnny Guitar Watson, or Led Zeppelin, or, you know, Jethro Tull, or whomever, Santana, Jimi Hendrix. And then I began, well, who's playing the guitar? What song is that? But that probably didn't really begin to happen so much until I was probably about 11 years old, where I really began to associate people with a song on the radio or a record. I began to play professionally at 13 with people in the neighborhood. Big Moody, his name was Wakefield Coney, and he loved John Lee Hooker and Lightning Hopkins and all of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So I would have to mimic those sounds, and you know, so that's after that. You know, you get paid a little bit of money. You know, so I'm like, wow, this is fun, and I can get a hamburger and a Coke. You know what I mean? And then when I was about 15, my cousin Willie Gentry, who was a phenomenal bassist, was in a band called Tower Soul, and they were sort of like they sort of imitated Tower of Power, you know, which was the great, you know, funk West Coast thing. And so I went to a rehearsal with him, and I actually picked out the song that they were practicing, and they were kind of like astonished, you know, these are like college instructors and school teachers and people in college. And so I began to play with them at 15, which was really such an education, you know, with horns and things like that, you know, from just sitting around here, my grandmother, my grandfather play, and playing, you know, blues with Big Moody. And then now, you know, we're hearing Tower Power, and then, you know, for example, then, you know, Chick Corea and Return to Forever, you know, and all of this kind of stuff. I've always made a living playing music. Music is inside of you. Even though the guitar is my main instrument, I play drums, I play a little piano, just enough to write songs and voice things, and I do horn arrangements, I do string arrangements, and I produce records, and I'm an engineer as well. So when you say playing music, it's really more appropriate for me doing music. I'm working as an arranger and a choir director, and for that I'm not playing guitar. So, and then what I did about the last of August, I was doing a project with Dr. John and Cyril Neville, where I was playing guitar, and arranging vocals and working with horn section as well. So it's not just the aspect of playing music live. Well, that was done. Well, I was probably about 19 years old, and I began when I went to Jackson State University in Jackson when I was 17. The first person I met at Malaco Records was the great drummer James Stroud. And James, went on to Nashville, and I think he was like maybe the head of A&M or MCA Nashville. And so I did a recording with maybe Liz Spraggins or someone, and when I was about 18, and then McKinley Mitchell, who moved back down from Chicago, had this huge record called The Town I Live In Is Lonely, and another called The End of the Rainbow. McKinley was doing a job in Yazoo, Mississippi with Eddie Floyd, and they hired Glenn Holmes, another great drummer who worked with Lattimore, and he hired me to play guitar. So I wrote the charts out, just for a point of memory. I got all these songs as opposed to trying to just memorize all of them. I could use the we call a lead sheet, for reference. McKinley noticed that, and he later hired me, and I was about 19 years old, and I began to go on the road with McKinley. We were doing shows with Eddie Floyd and Johnny Taylor and Tyrone Davis and Bobby Blue Bland and all of these people. To shorten the story, James Bennett, who had, I think the name of his record label was Jamla, but he had East Jackson Publishing. And I went in the studio with McKinley Mitchell to cut some things at Malaco, and I ended up playing guitar and a little Fender Rhodes on a couple of songs. And he knew McKinley. He had saw a show, and he asked me, he said, wow, the band sounds good. So the first actual recordings were done for James Bennett. And how I got that deal was by working and being band leader for McKinley Mitchell, who James Bennett may have distributed some of the earlier records and knew McKinley, which later went into the aspect of Bobby Rush moving from Chicago and me doing the Sue album with Bobby Rush at Malaco. And I think I was about maybe 20 or 21 years old then. The biggest crowd, wow, I don't know, because some of these festivals, like in South America and in Europe, and like the Chicago Blues Festival is a huge festival. And I played Central Park in New Orleans. Central Park in New York. So some of these, there's 50,000, 60,000 people there. As far as you can see, it's people. So I don't really know. The smallest crowd, I don't know, maybe something in a library or just some intimate setting. Maybe 12 people. But it's the same for me. Yeah. Not just one. There are many. I've recorded with B.B. King on his Blues Summit project that won a Grammy. So, of course, B.B. King has a very, dear place in my heart. Off the stage, he was a wonderful person, wonderful human being. Katie Webster, of course, was a dear sweetheart. She's like my musical mom. And Katie would come here and stay, 2 or 3 months at a time. And a lot of people don't know that Katie was a phenomenal, well-rounded pianist, gospel, blues, and jazz, and a little classical as well. So Katie really pushed me to record as an artist. Katie and Johnny Taylor. Johnny Taylor was a phenomenal singer. Incredible. The artist, I've known no artist with a bigger ego than Johnny Taylor. Phenomenal ego. But just an incredible singer. And he pushed me to perform as an artist, not just as a sideman. Bobby Rush and I have had a relationship for 35 years. I've been recording with Bobby Rush for 35 years. And we just finished his new CD that came out September 16th called Porcupine Meat. And that was, just a treat to do with Scott Billington, and it's released on Rounder, and I'm the musical director for that project as well. And it's very cool, and I'm very honored that they featured me with Joe Bonamassa, Keb Mo, and some other people on the album. So So, I have these wonderful experiences with all these people, so I can't just pick one. And because I call those names, it doesn't mean that there are other special people, but there are many special. The need to eat. I say that in this sense. Let's start from the beginning. The first thing was developed was, of course, my family. So when I was young, even when I was a teenager, I could sound like older musicians. That's what got me work. I didn't know why, you know what I mean? But when I got to Jackson, while the other people my age were probably into, Earth, Wind and Fire and Graham Central Station and maybe the Commodores and Isley Brothers and all of that stuff. And I liked that stuff. But I came from more of a blues background, and I could play that music. And my uncle had given me a Billy Cobham record because I was a drummer. I was a percussionist. That's my major at university is drums. And my father had given me a Wes Montgomery record when I was about 16. So I had all this blues around me all the time, but then here's Billy Cobham on drums, which is fusion, with Jan Hammer, Lee Scar on bass and Tommy Bolin on guitar. So I'm like, wow, And then my father gives me road songs, Wes Montgomery, which is Creed Taylor, all of that stuff. So I had all this blues as the foundation. Now I have fusion and now I have jazz. So the thing that, and that gospel as well, my foundation, blues and gospel. So what has helped me is to have a foundation that began with blues and gospel, and then jazz and fusion, or contemporary jazz, however you want to call it, more electric jazz, came together, and then with the funk and all of this stuff. So being versatile, but having a strong cultural foundation of blues and gospel. So, of course, and I still do sessions for people in various styles of music, and then I perform as VASTI Jackson as a featured artist. And because, growing up, I had to work with choir in the church and at school, and so, you learn to arrange voices and how to communicate a certain depth of emotion within a song, not just based upon, the melody, but also based upon the story. And what happens, a lot of times people don't really pay attention to this story. So how would this story feel if it were me? Not the melody, just the lyric. Let's see, interpret the lyric and don't think about the melody. How does the story make you feel emotionally? Now put that to the melody as it felt if you experienced it, as opposed to just learning to sing the song exactly the way someone else recorded it. So then you have the opportunity to make the song more of your own. If you love music and the art, remember that art is over here and commerce is over there. Don't make your art cheap simply because someone is paying you a little money. Always have compassion for your art and passion for your art. Not passion alone, but compassion. Love it, respect it. It is truly a gift to be able to make music. And that doesn't mean, and then it's an icing on top of that to have an audience appreciate your music. But I make music virtually every day, whether people hear it or not, because I love music. So I don't become a better musician for the audience. I become better because in gratitude and appreciation for the gift that God has given me, the only true thanks that I can give back to God is to actually have a relationship with music and make that a holistic, righteous relationship. I believe all good things come from God. So whatever I return to God must be good. And that is a personal relationship. Now, if you want to talk about career and employment, that's a whole different story. Once again, you have people who, can write a very catchy chorus for a song and it becomes a hit record. Artistically, it may be nothing. You have to be very elemental, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't really devalue it when it comes down to the psyche and the emotion of human beings, because there's something for everybody. Maybe there's a song that people just need to go, driving with my hair in the top down on my car, I can feel the wind. Now, that's just something that someone enjoys. That's good. And then someone may write a melody that may be for someone else. So if you're looking at it just to, let me construct something that'll make money, then the art is going to suffer. You know what I mean? I write my own songs, I publish my own songs, I have my own label. So when I choose to record music or present music to the public, I don't have any restrictions artistically. Now, will a record label think that that will be a good piece of merchandise to market and sell? Maybe, maybe not. But I generally say artistically what I want to say without shaping it relative to what people expect me to say. Well, I thank the people of Europe for truly having an overstanding of life giving birth to culture that gives birth to art. We know that blues and roots music commercially is not the most successful or popular music, but most of the audiences in Europe appreciate the life, the culture that has brought forth this sound. And being a native Mississippian, the blues is intrinsic to all popular music. I believe one reason is because of the basic blues feel of the shuffle is the heartbeat. Now, and I think that's one of the reasons every human being, once they feel that in some sort of rhythm, they can identify with it from a primal standpoint. But America is a new country. When you look at Norway and you look at some of these countries, they have churches that are still standing at 1,200 years old. We're roughly, 400 years old, a little more. So when we look at that, I think the Europeans appreciate things in a greater sense of longevity and endurance, and where we've been so on the cutting edge of creating things and making new things and new things. So something new comes and we'll discard. Something new you will discard. And we don't oftentimes recognize that there's a thread. There's a thread that connects, traditional blues with hip hop and jazz. And we have all these divisions, Whereas the Europeans tend to like something that's good and doesn't all have to be the same. European artists, you can go to a festival and there'll be blues on the festival, and there'll be reggae on the festival, and there'll be jazz on the festival, and there'll be gospel on the festival, and the audience can appreciate all of the different genres of music. Here in America, it's a gospel festival, it's gospel. If it's blues festival and a gospel, maybe they have blues on Saturday, they have gospel on Sunday. You see, so I thank the European audience for being very open-minded, and for willing to examine old and new things. Because blues cannot stay, and it never did stay, the same as Robert Johnson and Big Boy Crudup and many of these people, because in their day and age, they were cutting edge. You see, so what we think of as being old at the time these things were recorded or captured, they were new. Robert Johnson was like Prince. He was like the Jimi Hendrix of his day in Mississippi. So what we have now is that a lot of times things are parodied. You know what I mean? It's just like guys are imitating the old sound. And why? You respect the tradition. build from the tradition. Don't get trapped into being an imitation of Robert Johnson or T-Bone Walker or B.B. King. So that's why I'm always writing new songs, and songs are not always shuffles, and songs are not always 1-4-5, because when we go back to the root of it, the blues was not all 1-4-5, and the blues was not all a shuffle, you see, and the music accompanied the story. Now with 12-bar blues, the story is restricted to a form, and we don't live life like that. Excuse me. Life has variances. You never know what you may encounter on your journey from Hattiesburg to Meridian to New Orleans, and you have to be willing to be flexible and to adjust. And the blues has always been very flexible. That's why it's in rock and roll. That's why Led Zeppelin. That's why Bon Jovi. That's why Tupac Shakur. That's why Taylor Swift in country. That's why you can hear the blues elements and all the things, because blues is very malleable. So, and I think the European audience is more receptive to it being a little to the left, a little to the right, and at the same time respecting the tradition, not throwing the tradition away. Now, America, we want the new thing. What's the new thing? But we tend to sort of discard the tradition more.